when silence speaks louder than fame. Have you ever seen a celebrity moment that didn't explode with drama, but instead sank quietly into your bones? It began like any other late-night segment. The lights swept across the studio like a concert prelude. The music hit with a pulse that echoed off every surface. Fans screamed, cameras rolled, and then he walked in. Justin Bieber. No backup dancers, no entourage, no theatrics. Just Justin. Dressed in a muted black shirt and dark jeans, his presence alone seemed to hush the noise around him. The world knew him as the chart topper, the tabloid magnate, the former teen sensation who'd grown into an enigma. But tonight, something was different. Jimmy Kimmel was ready, smiling, polished, cue cards in hand. He welcomed Justin with that signature charm, light jokes, warm banter, and a twinkle in his eye that hinted at mischief. But beneath the surface, there was a plan. Not just to interview, but to challenge, to stir something, to pull back the curtain on a man who had, for years, kept parts of himself fiercely guarded. The crowd expected laughter, a few quirky stories, maybe a meme or two, but what they got was something no one could have predicted. As the first few questions rolled out, Justin responded with a calm that felt almost sacred. He spoke of silence, of purpose, of the spaces between sound where truth hides. Jimmy, trying to keep it light, began to poke a little harder, asking about the faith behind Justin's latest documentary, showing viral memes, making offhand jokes about his cross necklace. The studio laughed on cue, but Justin didn't. Instead, he paused. And that pause, just a second too long, shifted everything. Behind the scenes, a producer whispered, "We're pushing him." Maggie, the silent presence in the wings, knew it too. She pressed record on her phone. Something was coming. Within moments, the tone in the room changed. The laughter felt offbeat. Jimmy pushed harder. Justin grew quieter. Not weak, not defensive. Just. Still. The kind of stillness that speaks louder than words. What happened next would ripple across the internet in hours. But for now, in that studio, something was unfolding that no one, no director, no writer, no audience member, could script. A confrontation not with volume, but with truth. Not with spectacle, but with soul. And it all started with silence. The calm before the storm. The applause was deafening, but Justin's steps were silent. He walked across the stage like someone who had outgrown the need to perform. Not cold, not arrogant, just calm. His eyes scanned the studio once, slowly. He offered a brief wave, then took his seat beside Jimmy Kimmel, his posture composed, his hands folded. The crowd cheered, some whistled, others held up their phones. But Justin didn't feed it. He didn't flash a grin or toss out a quip. Instead, he offered a smile so faint it almost disappeared. Jimmy leaned in with the comfort of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. "We've got a special guest tonight, folks," he began, eyes twinkling. "Not just a pop star, not just a global icon. He's a guy who's lived 1,000 lives before 30. He's been the hero, the villain, and sometimes somehow both." The audience chuckled. Justin nodded, polite. "So," Jimmy continued, "you've got a new project. A little different this time, right? No stadiums, no dance numbers." Justin nodded again. "It's a documentary," he said quietly. "It's called Between Silence. It's about faith, about how sometimes the loudest things we carry are the ones we never say." Jimmy raised an eyebrow. "Sounds intense." Justin didn't blink. "What's intense," he said, "is pretending everything's okay when it's not." That line landed like a dropped weight. Jimmy gave a nervous chuckle, glancing at his cue cards. Backstage, Maggie watched from behind the curtain. One hand tucked inside her coat pocket, clutching her phone, the other resting on her hip. Her eyes didn't follow Justin. They locked onto Jimmy's hands, watching the way he shuffled the cards. A producer leaned into the soundboard. "Tonight," he whispered, "we get a reaction." The other producer smirked. "He's too polished. We'll crack that." Maggie didn't react. She just slid her finger over her phone screen and tapped record. Back on stage, Jimmy tried to nudge the mood back to humor. 4 years working on this doc," he said. "Alone? You didn't talk to anyone?" Justin shrugged slightly. "Sometimes silence says more than words." Jimmy chuckled. "You ever think maybe you're just too serious, man?" Justin met his gaze without blinking. "Seriousness isn't the absence of joy," he replied. "It's the presence of purpose." Few light claps from the audience. Jimmy grinned, but it wavered. Okay, he said. "So you're like a monk now, but with cooler shoes?" Justin's mouth curved slightly, but not into a smile. "I'm not interested in shows." The room quieted just a touch. Not fully, not yet. But something shifted. Jimmy looked at his next card. The words meme, cross, faith were bolded. He hesitated, then kept going. "People want to laugh, man. They don't want therapy." "Right, folks." The crowd responded on cue, a wave of laughter and applause. Justin didn't move. His eyes dropped, just for a second, to Jimmy's cue cards. Then, slowly, he crossed his legs, leaned back, not in ease, but in readiness. Backstage, Maggie's voice was barely audible. "They're pushing him, and he knows it." On stage, the lights gleamed brighter than necessary. Jimmy smiled wider than natural, and the man sitting beside him, the one who had been mocked, worshipped, misunderstood, sat with the kind of silence that feels like thunder waiting to strike. The crowd didn't see it yet, but Justin did, and so did Maggie. The subtle taunt, the screen behind them flickered to life. Bright images popped up, memes, tweets, awkward photos of Justin taken out of context, the kind that turned him from a human into a headline. Jimmy turned toward the crowd with a smirk, almost bouncing in his seat. "You guys know the meme economy loves this man," he said, chuckling. "Let's take a look at some of the internet's finest work." The audience cheered. Justin remained still. The first image appeared. It was grainy, clearly taken by paparazzi. Justin sat alone on a bench outside a hospital. A hoodie covered half his face, a mask over his mouth. Someone had slapped a cartoon, halo over his head, and labelled it St. Bieber of Ailments. The crowd roared with laughter. Jimmy pointed at the screen. "Even when you're picking up painkillers, you still look like you're healing the world." Justin's lips didn't move. His eyes stayed on the image, the edges of his faint smile from earlier gone. The next slide. A red carpet photo zoomed in on the silver cross hanging around his neck. The caption read, "Pop Prophet." Jimmy leaned forward, voice teasing. "Now here's a pop star who goes to confession." The crowd erupted again. Someone whistled. Another shouted, "Preach, Bieber!" Still, Justin didn't react. He blinked, slow, calculated. But the silence between his responses. It was no longer passive. Backstage, Maggie was frozen. Her jaw clenched, her eyes glued to that cross on the screen. She remembered it. She remembered the funeral. She remembered placing it in his palm when his voice had cracked too much to say goodbye. She knew what it meant, and she knew Jimmy didn't. Jimmy, still floating on laughter, pressed on. "So be honest, man, are you like a monk now? Or just a really good actor pretending not to be pissed off?" The energy shifted. Not completely, but noticeably. A murmur passed through the front rows. Jimmy's grin twitched slightly. Justin didn't raise his voice. He didn't stiffen or recoil. His response came quietly, evenly. "The pain I've lived through," he said, "taught me that silence also speaks." The room paused. The audience, caught mid-smile, fell into a strange hush. A few people clapped, soft, hesitant. Others looked around, confused. Jimmy cleared his throat. He tried to smile. It came out sideways. Okay, I deserve that, he muttered. I mean, I'm just trying to keep things fun here. You're kind of like walking poetry. I don't know what to do with that. Justin nodded once. Maybe just listen. The studio lights felt hotter now. Jimmy blinked, glanced again at his cue cards, as if they'd help him steer the moment back. But the cards weren't in control anymore. Here's a tweet, Jimmy said, forcing a chuckle. Someone wrote, and I quote, "Justin Bieber is what would happen if empathy had a six-pack. You think that's fair?" "I don't think empathy needs muscles," Justin replied. "It needs presence." Jimmy put the card down slowly. "Man, you always been like this." Justin turned to him fully. His tone was still soft. "You mean not laughing when the pain isn't mine?" Again, silence. Not awkward. Not dead air, but sharp. Focused. The kind of silence that pried open something deeper in every person watching. Jimmy laughed, short and clipped. He lifted his hands like a game show host, resetting the vibe. Okay, time to shake things up. Let's play a little game, shall we?" The screen behind them blinked again. Bright colors, bubbly letters. True or false? Bieber edition. Jimmy turned to the camera, grinning like a man clinging to a lifeline. "Here's how it works. We show a headline. Justin tells us if it's real or just internet nonsense." Sound good? Justin didn't respond immediately. Then, slowly, "This isn't why I came here." Jimmy blinked. "Sorry, what?" "This interview," Justin said. "It's become a spectacle. I'm not here to play a part." A few people in the audience clapped, quiet, supportive. The rest glanced around, unsure of the rules anymore. Jimmy forced another smile. "You really take this stuff seriously, huh?" Justin leaned in slightly. Not aggressively, just close enough to make it real. "And maybe you need to feel something real." The words landed like a dropped truth in a still pond. Jimmy blinked twice. The grin slipped completely now. His eyes darted, searching for the cue, the punchline, the save, but there wasn't one. Backstage, a camera assistant looked to the control booth. In the headset, a voice whispered, "He's flipping it. Bieber's flipping the room." On stage, the laughter had evaporated. The crowd leaned forward. The lights still burned. The cameras still rolled. But no one was sure what kind of show this was anymore. Jimmy stared at Justin. And Justin, he didn't blink. He waited, because he knew exactly where this was going. The unexpected silence. For a moment, no one moved. The cameras captured everything. Jimmy frozen, cue cards limp in his hand, and Justin, composed, still, unwavering. The tension wasn't in what was said. It was in what wasn't. Then Justin spoke. "My sister died of leukemia," he said quietly. "I was 23. I slept on a hospital floor for 2 years. A collective breath was held. My daughter," he continued, his voice low, steady, "was stillborn. We named her Ava. I buried her on a rainy afternoon in the Hollywood Hills. No music. No lighting cue. Just the soft hum of the studio lights and the weight of words that demanded nothing but listening." In the front row, someone's hand reached slowly for a friend's. Another audience member lowered their phone. Even those who came for jokes, who expected banter and gags, were now anchored by something real. Jimmy shifted in his chair. His mouth opened, but he had no words. Justin went on, "My best friend. He crashed into a tree at 90 miles per hour. The car exploded. I was supposed to be with him that night. He wasn't trying to shock. He wasn't trying to win. He was simply speaking. I chose silence," Justin said. "Not because I had nothing to say, but because everything I could say felt small." Backstage, Maggie's hand covered her mouth. Her eyes glistened. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. She just listened. Jimmy cleared his throat, finally. "Look, man, I didn't mean to. I was just trying to lighten the mood." Justin's eyes didn't move. And sometimes humor is a shield. I get that, he said. But when you turn someone's grief into a guessing game, what are you really doing? Jimmy blinked slowly. Then, like a reflex, he forced a wide smile. Let's get back to the fun, huh? He waved toward the screen behind them. Let's not get too dark. The screen changed. More headlines, bright fonts, tabloid snapshots. A new question. Which of these Justin stories is true? Justin buys ice cream for entire crew. Justin secretly funds cancer hospitals. Justin eats lunch alone in the park. Jimmy clapped his hands together. Okay, pick the true one, man. Justin didn't even look at the screen. This isn't a game, he said. And this isn't the place. The silence that followed wasn't just a pause, it was rupture, like a crack in something too polished. A murmur rolled through the audience, uneasy, shifting, unsure. Some still smiled, out of habit. Others began to lean back, their laughter, now replaced by a quiet curiosity. Something was happening here, and it was no longer entertainment. Jimmy tried again, this time with a sharper edge. You know, you take everything so damn seriously. Maybe that's your problem. Maybe you need to lighten up. Justin didn't flinch. He leaned in, voice calm, eyes locked. And maybe you need to feel something real. That line stopped. Jimmy cold. For the first time all night, the mask slipped. Not just the comedian, not just the host, but the man behind it, staring into the reflection of someone who refused to play along. Backstage, the director leaned forward, whispering into her headset. He's losing it. Bieber's turning the whole thing on him. Jimmy sat, hands limp, in his lap. The grin was gone now. Around him, the crowd had stopped waiting for a joke. They were listening. Really listening. Then Jimmy tried to push back. He laughed, a bitter, dry sound. You act like you're better than everyone. He said louder than before. Like whispering and looking at the floor makes you holy. That's not humility, Bieber. That's arrogance dressed up as depth. Gasps rippled through the room. A few phones lifted again. Someone in the back said, "Whoa." Justin didn't react. His gaze didn't waver. Behind the curtain, Maggie stepped forward. Not all the way, just enough so her shadow brushed the edge of the spotlight. Her body tensed. If this crossed one more line, she'd be there. But Justin didn't need rescuing. Instead, he leaned forward, his voice soft, unshakable. You said in an interview once, he began, that your father left when you were young. That you were afraid people would see you as weak. Jimmy's mouth opened slightly, but he didn't respond. Justin continued, voice even. And now you sit here, mocking someone for their grief, for their silence, for their faith. But I see what this is. The audience was silent again. Not awkward, not confused, but riveted. You know exactly what it's like to be ridiculed, Justin said. And tonight, you became the man who once made you feel small. Jimmy blinked. His hands dropped. He didn't move. The lights still burned bright, but the stage no longer belonged to him. In the crowd, someone began to clap, then another, and another. It wasn't loud, it wasn't forced, but it was real, and it was growing, turning the tables. The applause didn't crash like a wave, it built like a tide, slow, steady, undeniable. Not everyone clapped at first. Some still watched in stunned silence. Others hesitated, caught between Showtime instincts and something more human. But it grew, hand by hand, clap by clap, until the room was no longer filled with audience members waiting to laugh. It was filled with people, listening. Jimmy sat still, face slightly flushed, hands unmoving. He tried to smile, just enough to reclaim control. But the edges of his mouth wouldn't cooperate. His fingers twitched once over the desk, reaching for the next cue card, but it was damp. Water from the mug he'd knocked earlier had bled into the paper. The ink had blurred. The show was slipping through his fingers. Justin remained calm, Not smug, not triumphant, just present. I read that interview, Justin said. The one where you said being called weak was worse than being called cruel. Jimmy's eyes flickered. Justin leaned forward slightly. You said that after your dad left, the silence in your house was worse than the yelling, that you learned to be loud, just so no one could hear how scared you were. A flicker passed through Jimmy's expression, like a memory, forcing its way into the moment. You know what it feels like to be laughed at, Justin said, to be doubted, to be questioned for how you feel, and yet, here you are, turning someone else into the punchline. The words weren't cruel, they weren't loud, but they were devastating in their simplicity. You turned into the thing that used to hurt you, Justin added. No judgment, no malice, just truth. Jimmy stared at him, chest rising and falling more quickly. Now. He gave a short, bitter laugh. You think you know me? He asked. But the strength behind it was hollow. Justin didn't blink. No, he said softly. I just know what pain does to people. Behind the scenes, producers exchanged glances. One whispered, cut to commercial. Another shook their head. Not a chance. This is something else. On stage, the lights didn't shift, the cameras didn't pan dramatically, but the atmosphere had changed completely. This wasn't a celebrity appearance anymore. This was a reckoning, and the crowd knew it. Someone clapped again. Others joined. It wasn't polite. It wasn't for show. It was a recognition of vulnerability, of honesty, of something far rarer than entertainment. Jimmy sat back in his chair, visibly rattled. His eyes scanned the audience. He wasn't used to being the one under the lights without a script. Man, he muttered, rubbing his jaw. This isn't what I planned. I know, Justin said. But it's what happened. Jimmy's fingers tapped the desk. He looked at the cue cards again, now useless. Then at Justin, then at the crowd. I was trying to make it fun, Jimmy said. That's my job. Justin nodded. Sometimes it is, and sometimes your job is to listen. The words weren't a rebuke. They were an invitation. But Jimmy didn't take it. He straightened in his chair, trying to recover his rhythm. So, he said, louder, trying to laugh again. What's next? You gonna walk off now? Storm out? That'd make a hell of a viral moment. Justin smiled faintly. No need to storm. I don't need to make a moment. He paused. I already lived through them. A few gasps, some claps, and a stretch of silence that felt like the breath between two storms. Then, Jimmy made a final attempt to spin it back. So what, man? You think you're better than all this? Justin looked at him with a calm that didn't flinch. I don't think I'm better, he said. I just know I'm done pretending pain is funny. That was the final turn, not just in the conversation, but in the entire show. The crowd shifted forward in their seats, phones lifted again. Not for spectacle, but for witness. Maggie stepped closer from backstage, her eyes on Justin, her breath catching. And Jimmy, he sat there. No cards, no comebacks, no laughs left, just one man, being seen, finally, and another, refusing to be unseen anymore. Then something happened that no one expected. Jimmy whispered, I didn't mean to become him. Justin didn't ask who him was. He already knew, and in that moment, something broke. Not violently, but quietly. The kind of breaking that comes after years of holding too much. Justin didn't rise. Not yet. He sat still, letting the silence work, letting it settle, not for effect, but for truth. Jimmy took a breath, slower this time. I guess I forgot what this was supposed to be, he said. Justin finally nodded. Then maybe now, you remember. The room held still. Nothing forced, nothing shouted. Just a room full of people, famous and not, witnessing something rare. A table turned, a truth spoken, a silence. finally heard. The exit and the echo. The silence was no longer uncomfortable. It had become sacred. No one moved. No one laughed. The studio, usually a hive of applause signs, countdown cues, and choreographed energy, had surrendered to something far more raw, real. Jimmy sat hunched slightly, hands on the desk, the water from the spilled mug soaking into the cue cards in front of him. The pages had curled. The ink bled across the words like something wounded. Across from him, Justin sat upright, shoulders relaxed, expression neutral. But his calm no longer read as passive. It felt earned, weathered, immovable. And then, slowly, he stood. No dramatics, no speech, no tension in his body. He stood the way he had arrived, without permission, without need, with purpose. Jimmy didn't stop him. His eyes followed Justin like a man realizing too late that something important had passed through his hands. As Justin stepped toward the edge of the stage, a security guard shifted near the curtain. Instinct, movement, authority trying to reclaim the moment. But before the guard took another step, Maggie appeared. She placed a single hand on his arm, her voice quiet but firm. "Let him go," she said. Then, after a pause, added, "But on his terms." Justin paused near the edge of the stage. He turned, not dramatically, not for applause, but to see the audience, really see them. They stared back. Not as fans, not as spectators, but as people who had just watched something they couldn't categorize. A pop icon refusing to be entertainment. A man stepping outside the spotlight to remind everyone what humanity looked like when it wasn't filtered, scripted, or sold. Then Justin spoke, just once more. "Thank you for listening," he said. "Not to me, but to what matters." The audience didn't cheer at first. They rose. One row, then another. Standing. Quiet. Hands coming together in applause that wasn't celebratory. It was reverent. The ovation built not like a wave, but like a memory. Slow. Meaningful. A room full of people processing that they hadn't just seen a show. They'd seen a mirror. Jimmy remained seated. He didn't speak, didn't smile. His eyes stayed down. His fingers ran across the ruined cards, lifting one gently. The words had melted into a dark smear. Beside him, the mug rolled off the edge of the desk, landing on the floor with a soft thud. Water spread, slowly toward the base of the stage, like time running out. He didn't move to stop it. He simply watched it go. Backstage, Maggie waited as Justin stepped into the shadows. The moment he disappeared from view, she reached out and placed his phone back in his hand. "You should see this," she whispered. He glanced at the screen. The video, his video, was already online. The clip of him speaking quietly, standing up, walking out. It had already hit 1 million views, and it was climbing. Fast. He didn't smile, but his eyes held something just under the surface. Not triumph, not revenge, relief. "Maybe," he said softly. "They're finally listening." Outside, the night air was cool, still. A breeze danced through the parking lot, lifting a discarded flyer and spinning it gently toward the sidewalk. Justin didn't speak again. He didn't need to. He slipped the phone into his pocket and walked into the dark, into the world, into whatever came next. And this time, the world didn't look away. Back inside the studio, Jimmy finally stood. He looked out at the standing audience, hands folded, lips pressed together. No music played. No jokes were made. The control booth didn't call cut because no one wanted to. Something had happened here. Something not even a viral headline could cheapen. It wasn't entertainment. It was exposure. Not of scandal. Of truth. Of pain. Of grace. And maybe that's what real power looks like. Not in how loud you can speak, but in whether your silence can still be heard. Echoes after the silence. Sometimes, the loudest moment isn't a mic drop. It's the silence that follows. That night on Jimmy Kimmel's stage wasn't supposed to change anything. It was meant to be another segment in a long line of talk, show appearances, jokes, stories, promotion, smiles on cue. But it became something else entirely. It became a reminder that fame doesn't erase grief, that charisma doesn't protect against pain, that even the biggest stage can be used not to entertain, but to confront. Justin Bieber didn't walk off that night in anger. He walked off in truth, and that truth echoed across phones, laptops, TVs, through comment sections and news cycles. Respect. Goosebumps. This wasn't an interview. It was a masterclass in being human. Words poured in. Viewers from every corner of the internet chimed in, not to gossip, but to reflect. People weren't just watching him. They were feeling him. News anchors dissected it. Experts weighed in. Psychologists spoke of emotional resilience under public pressure. Media critics called it the collapse of late night's comfort zone. But the most important voices weren't experts. They were ordinary people. People who'd been mocked for staying quiet, for grieving privately, for believing deeply in something the world tried to turn into punchlines. Justin didn't just hold his ground. He gave others permission to do the same. And in a culture obsessed with being heard, he reminded us that sometimes it's more powerful to listen, to pause, to resist the urge to make pain digestible for the sake of a laugh. Because some things aren't jokes. Some stories don't need punchlines. They need space. And maybe you felt something watching this too. Maybe you saw a piece of your own story in Justin's stillness. Maybe you remembered a moment where someone tried to laugh off your wounds, or where you laughed just to survive the moment. And maybe now you're ready to stop pretending. Because silence, when chosen, isn't weakness. It's presence, it's clarity, it's power. So if this story stirred something in you, don't let it fade when the video ends. Let it live. Let it echo. Share it. Comment below. What part hit you hardest? Have you ever been made to feel like your grief was too serious for the room? We want to hear your story. And if you thought this was powerful, wait until you see what happens next. Because the story isn't over. In the next episode, we follow what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. The aftermath behind closed doors. The decision Jimmy made that no one expected. And the quiet choice Justin made that might change the industry forever. Make sure you're subscribed. Turn on notifications. Because sometimes, the real story begins after the silence.